Go ahead.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Lion's Den of Leadership. This is your host, Steve Rozenberg, along with my very good friend, Alex Osenenko. Did I get it? I got it. Nice. So we have the show, The Lion's Den of Leadership. And the reason that we created this show is to basically talk to other entrepreneurs at a level that they can understand. And what I mean by that is all of us as entrepreneurs run into problems. We run into strategic problems. We run into logistical problems. Whatever it is, we have, maybe it's employee challenge. It really doesn't matter. But, our jobs as leaders is to find these problems, fix them, or I should say challenges, fix them as quick as we can to help our employees be able to do their jobs better. And so, this isn't just related to real estate. This is any business. And we're going to talk to our very good friend today, who is not, we actually met in real estate, kind of a funny story, but his business is not in real estate, and he has a booming business. But, I'm sure as we talk to him and Alex kind of dissects a little bit, we're going to see what challenges he has and what he deals with. So, Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Steve. You're in Sydney today?
I am. I'm in Sydney, Australia today.
So those of our listeners who prefer to watch, Steve may go in and out video-wise, but he is a master traveler and he's a master podcaster. So he'll hold his own, despite of these usual for him circumstances of being somewhere else. Always.
That's right.
Why don't you, Steve, introduce our guest? You have a relationship with James. I don't. I'd love to build one. So let us know who he is and what he's all about.
Yep. So my guest today, his name is James Morris. James and I met actually about 15 years ago, we figured out the other day, through real estate. This is back before I owned a company. I was actually flipping properties and went to buy his house, actually. Wow. And sat down with him. We had a really good conversation, and he was really interested in what I did and how I did it. We talked it all through. I told him exactly what I was going to do, how I was going to make my money on the deal. And he was very intrigued. And so we ended up doing the deal with him, got his house, flipped it. And then about, I would say maybe 6 months later, he calls me up and he wants to buy a couple houses for rentals for his own. So we go down that dance and we find him a couple properties, and the relationship kept going. We kept being friends, kept talking. Then I actually showed him how to do some flipping. And he and I would go out and travel around and do some flipping together. We flipped some properties, and I was like anything, I was kind of 110% at it. So I was kind of a machine. Had a pretty good system down to wholesale and flip properties back in the day. And then, bought the apartment complexes and houses, and my story kind of traversed. And James split off from corporate world, started his own company. I'll let him explain what that is. And kind of the rest is history. We've kind of stayed outside friends, kind of, if you will, touching base with each other every now and then, promising to get together. Once in a while, I'll have to take him to the gym and school him a little bit on how to train and work out. But, so James, without further ado, thanks so much for being on the show, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Hey, Steve, I appreciate the opportunity. And is it Alex?
Yeah.
Yep, pleasure to meet you, Alex. Yeah, Steve, you pretty much hit it on the head. Again, 15 years ago, and he came and he bought a property from me that I'd put on the market and didn't want to deal with the realtor, and I was very skeptical. But Steve came in, made me feel real comfortable, and the process was so cool that I was like, man, I want to do this. And the thing that I love is properties that I bought from Steve 15 years ago. Allow those properties to mature, gain more and more equity into those properties. And when I made the decision to split off from corporate America, and I was looking for cash and trying to avoid debt as much as possible, I was actually able to sell my properties retail and then take that cash and sink it into my business that I have today. So, coincidentally had my TMC logo on today. Wasn't quite sure I would be on screen, but the name of my company is TMC Workforce Solutions, the Morris Company. And I've actually owned a couple of companies. One is a national staffing firm. So I've got about 500 employees across the United States. Got people in Texas, Indiana, Kentucky, Wisconsin, got a few IT people spread around the country, and we specialize in light industrial, call center, administrative, and engineering staffing. And we also do a lot of direct hire recruiting. So been very, very fortunate to grow a business. Through the business that I own, TNC Workforce Solutions, one of my clients had a supplier that was retiring, and it opened up the door for me to buy a distribution fulfillment company, which was Summit Line Industries. It's now TMC Supply Chain Solutions. And we're dealing with a couple of Fortune 50 companies where we're bringing in product, breaking it down, pick, packing, and shipping it all over the world every single day. So real fun stuff. Lots of moving parts.
Wow, that's impressive. That sounds like a lot of different things. So just trying to understand this. There's two distinct businesses that you run that are not necessarily related, or is there a relationship between the two?
They are not related. They're two completely separate entities, two separate standalone businesses.
Okay, and so how do you split your time? And so maybe we'll, before we go there, I want to understand the businesses, and let our audience understand a little bit, because a lot of property management company entrepreneurs, business owners are listening right now. Some of them may own other businesses as well, but that's the bulk of our I think audience. And what I want to know is a little bit, who is your perfect client, and what do you solve for the staffing agency and the supply business? Like, can you walk through that?
Absolutely. So what I'll do first is I'll talk a little bit about the supply chain business. What we ran into was one of my previous employers, R. Donnelly, the world's largest printing company. They've got several customers around the U.S. that buy lots and lots of print material. One of the challenges that needed to be solved was, if you take a company like a FedEx or a UPS or a Delta Airlines or a Macy's, and they buy, millions and millions of dollars of print material, but the factories that print that material, they print it in pallet loads at a time. And each one of those individual facilities, they just need a specific quantity. So they don't want to buy 52 pallets of material. So what I do is I buy that 52 pallets of material. I break it down into the quantities that each location needs it in. Then I ship, that one part number with the 7 or 8 other part numbers that we buy that they need. And we put together specialized orders for them every single day. So my company ships anywhere from 700 to 1,000 orders a day. And we ship to every one of those companies that I named earlier. They're major distribution facilities in the United States, and we ship internationally. So it's really, we do packaging, we do sorting, a lot of postponement, if you will. We break product down and ship it to the customers in the right quantities. So storage is very valuable. One of the things that the big boys don't want to do is they don't want to store 50 pallets of material. They want to store 10 cartons. And 10 cartons of printed material may last them, weeks or months. So what we create some convenience. And as a certified minority supplier, we also allow them to meet some of their diversity spend goals.
I got it. Yeah. So I read that on your website. I did go to study up a little bit, and it looks like you have a little bit of a chain link between your staffing agency and the supplier business, in a way that you help people, as far as I understand, maybe I understand it wrong, but you help people to build the diversity supply chain, build diversity into the supply chain, right? Through your staffing agency, or did I understand it incorrectly?
Well, and we're actually able to do that through both companies. The difference is that, I guess the similarities or the connections between the two companies are, my staffing company supplies staff to some of the same people that we supply material to. Because we had an existing relationship, they know us, they know me. And let me take a few steps back so that this makes a little more sense. I came out of corporate America. I spent the first part of my years after college at HP. Went to work for R. Donnelly just through mergers and acquisitions. We had a $400 million company that we sold for $2.5 billion. And R. Donnelly bought us, and I basically ran a $100 million business unit for them for 12 years. So worked in the U.S., worked all over Europe, many facilities across the U.S. And my story really is I turned 40 years old. I'm watching these entrepreneurs doing their things. And I remember going through my performance review and my VP saying, hey, man, here's your 3% annual increase in your review, and we'll see you next year. Thanks for the great work. And I knew that this isn't how I wanted to spend my life. So I basically gave him a 12-month notice and said, hey, man, I love you. I love my job, but I got to do something for myself. And, of course, they didn't think I'd leave. We got 11 months into it, and my VP came to me and says, hey, if you're insistent on leaving, then why don't you let us be your first customer? And I know that's very rare. So
that is
they basically
awesome,
gave me so my VP of global operations gave me an opportunity to bid on $1 million contract, which we jumped all over it. And, within 6 months, we were probably doing $1 million a month with my previous employer across 3 states. That same employer, a year later said, hey, we got a guy that's retiring, but he's a top supplier. We don't want to lose that. Do you want to own a distribution fulfillment company? You've been running them for us for 12 years. And that's how I ended up buying Summit Line, which became TMC Supply Chain Solutions. So they're, again, 2 totally separate companies, but our Donnelly is a link to both. And again, we supply people and we supply a process. We supply storage, kitting services. But again, the 2 companies are completely separate. I have 2 different business unit leaders that run each business. So I've got a group president for each company, and they both are industry professionals that we brought on board that are very, very much experts in the industry. So they make my life a little easier.
Got you, James. Well,
So, James,
Steve, if you don't mind, let me just, there's a lot here to unpack. Hold on. I just want to sort of open up a few boxes and leave them out there for our inspection in a little bit here. First of all, the lesson here is, hey, if you want to start your own company, those of you who are listening who haven't done the deed yet or haven't really made the jump, what a way to do it. First of all, be excellent at what you do, right? You have to commit to the work you do and be probably one of the best or better employees out there, right? For sure, right? And build a relationship or in the organization, in your org. Then 12 months notice. Notice James didn't give a 2 weeks notice. He walked up to people who obviously needed him to be there, and he said, "Look, I'll do a smooth transition as possible. I'll give you 12 months, but I need my life. Like I have goals and I want to achieve them." And see, that's a really, really smart way to do it. And this funny thing you said, James, is like they probably thought you're not going to do it because 12 months is like, well, he's probably just kind of like midlife crisising right now. So we'll get him past that. But yeah, that's really, really good lesson. A lot of people are just cut off relationship with the current job, go somewhere else. This is really, really a good way to do it. And I think I have at least 1 or 2 other friends that have ended up in the same very similar situation where the employer they leave ended up being their first and best customer, and that's how they grew. So that is fascinating to me, and that is absolutely the right approach to building a business and a successful one. And how long ago, James? How long ago did you actually open your doors, the company?
So when I initially left, it was actually 7 years ago, and I had a partner. And so we got together. He had a lot of existing infrastructure and very well connected within the city of Houston. And so when we talked about it, he said, hey, why don't you come on board and begin to build it? What I did was every penny I made that I could afford to save. And, I kind of pigeonholed it. And at the end of I worked for him for 5 years. And once I basically stacked enough money, I went to him and said, hey, listen, I'm running the business unit alone. I'm carrying the responsibility. You're the safety net, but at this stage, it's really my company. And so I made him an offer. He understood it. He agreed, was gracious enough to accept it. And I bought the division. And so it was basically at that stage just a name change. So 100% of the staff that was on board, the systems, all the overhead and capital, I purchased it. and got a small office, and we were at work under the TMC logo. So it took a while to get to the point that we're at. So now I'm 7 years into it right now.
Gotcha. And so,
James,
go ahead, Steve.
So my question, just while we're on this subject, so, one of the things I think it's important for people to understand while you went through this, transfer period, and, mentally you had to change, right? You probably, the way you thought, going from lifetime employee to maybe I'm going to be an entrepreneur, now I'm actually making the steps. Can you kind of explain kind of what you went through mentally to make those decisions, and the fears that maybe you had, were they real? Were they not even evident? Did they not even play a part? And now moving forward, how you think probably much differently than you did, day one when you did the transfer. So just, can you kind of explain that to people? Because I think that's important for people to understand that, when you're becoming an entrepreneur, some of these fears that we all have in our minds that we talk ourselves into or out of, they're just made up, a lot of them. Now, some of them are real. Some of them are whatever you fear most ends up happening to you. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Steve. It's funny. Part of my 12 months notice was, yes, it was about being gracious and respectful and wanting to be, make it as easy for my employer as possible. But a lot of it was also fear. So some of the things that went in my mind was, if I give them a 12-month notice, I know I'll get another bonus. I can get another 12 months into my 401k. I'll get another 12 months of equity into my rental properties. I'm thinking, because I'd worked 20 years with a safety net. And I was afraid, quite frankly. I'd been with the same company for 12 years, and prior to, again, some outsourcing, I'd really been with the same company for 20 years. So I was leaving my comfort zone. But there was something burning inside of me that just says, I know that, if I can generate $100 million for this employer, then maybe I can generate $1 million for myself. And in the back of my mind and in my heart, I knew I could do it, but I was scared to death. I mean, I'd be lying if I said anything different. Getting out there, and immediately grabbing a partner with existing infrastructure, that was kind of like sticking my toe in the water, right? Because if I got a partner now, I only have half the risk, and we can share some of that, and so it really took me some time to build up the confidence. Now, what I look back and I realize is that this is the best thing I've ever done. I don't have any intention on ever, really filling out another job application in my life. I don't necessarily worry about failing, but I'm always aware of what my responsibility is. I've got 500 employees that I really look at like my children. They got to get paid every Friday. Medical insurance benefits have to be paid. So the same stresses that I experienced as a new father are the things that I experienced as an entrepreneur. I'm responsible for a lot of people. There's a lot of people relying on me to keep going, and that drives me. I'm super competitive. I like to win, and so every day this is a game that I go through that I've got to win today. I've got to win this hour. Coming from a manufacturing background, we measure things on the hour and on the minute. So I do find myself walking in offices sometimes just saying, hey, what are you guys doing? I need to know that we're taking steps to win. But my mind has completely changed. And I've got a different type of a spirit. I can remember days where, I may not feel like going to work when you have a job. You may take a sick day. You may take a vacation day. Well, I want to come to this place every day. I want to come into my office. My office is very comfortable. I've got guitars in my office, and I got pictures of my cars and the toys. And if I need a break, I'll pick something up and take a break. But, this has really becomes a part of my DNA. It really becomes.
So real quick, Alex, before you go. So were there things that you did fear that now you just kind of laugh off and just kind of go, man, I can't believe that I was afraid of that? Is there something that sticks out in your mind when you first got in this?
The biggest fear that I had, and the people closest to me, they really fed that fear. And it was, if I fail, I knew that I could go back to my employer and say, hey, I tried it. It didn't work out. and can I have my job back? And that was killing me. And that drove me. And what was so bad about it is that VP that gave me the opportunity every month or every time he had a problem, and I've done consulting for that company since, he would always say, hey, if this doesn't work out, you can always come home. And to me, that just felt like, I'm not the tuck your tail and drop your head and go back in the door type of a guy. So that was probably my biggest fear to keep striving.
Gotcha. There's a couple parallels here that I wanted to draw. One of them is I want to explore that a little bit more. It sounds, I don't know. So there's entrepreneurship game is about risk appetite. Like in a lot of ways, a lot of very, very smart people who can run incredible businesses end up not doing so. And it's sort of the risk tolerance. And in some ways, Jordan Moala, my friend who runs on the podcast, and he's always, each of his guests gets a question. It's like, hey, so are entrepreneurs born or bred? Right. And this is like you or James, you're kind of a proof that you can be bred as well, or become an entrepreneur, because it's sort of like you took your time and rolled into it, but nonetheless, you sort of what's the right way to say it? You didn't just flip the switch and go, but at the same time, you didn't back out also. So it's some kind of a character.
Like you strategically thought it out. Yeah.
You have a character to execute on the dream without the, without being too jumpy and overdoing it, but at the same time not pulling back a little bit, which is unusual. And I think in your case, do you feel like you were born with that entrepreneurial mindset, or you think it developed over time?
It absolutely developed over time. I will say 100% it was not born into me. I never wanted to own my own company. I always wanted to run big companies. I watched my grandfather work the same job for 35 years. I watched my dad, work for a city municipality for 35 years. I thought that, I might end up working a city job, which is a good job, or, my brother's at UPS for 20 years and he loves it. And so I come from a family history of people that are great employees, have done very well at their jobs, rise up the ladder, but we punch in and we punch out. I just felt like the company that we were running, there were parts of it that I was like, I can do that. But I think where you were going was, but I eased my way into it. I didn't just dive into the deep end of the pool. I eased my way into it. But those are things that you learn in corporate America. You learn to be risk averse. You really play for the win. And so that's really what I was doing, but certainly not born to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's I have this risk tolerance that is pretty high where I make decisions. I think Steve is the same way. We're very sort of we're open to fail, and we even openly discuss it. It's still difficult to fail. My biggest responsibility, and I concur with you, is the people that I work with that I brought into the company, who are running the company, and I really, really enjoy. And I think of them as a family. Mine is not as big. I only have 28 now. But we're all very close, right? This is a family we run. But I'm always fascinated by people with lower risk tolerance, like my dad, who started a delicatessen, Eastern European kielbasa's, and he is a computer engineer, physics, professor back in Russia, and then he sort of at the end of his career for programming, and then he just opened up this business and took a huge risk, which is unusual. And so fascinating by people, James, that they're smart enough to be deliberate about that risk. But with that, I want to ask a question. You must have failed somewhere, and it must have hurt. What is your biggest failure that hurt the most? Let's open that up a bit.
I think my biggest failure has been underestimating, and really being a finance major is where I really kicked myself. But and I guess since I've been a business owner, really underestimating some of the capital requirements. And so having to humble myself to, being at risk of not making a payroll or being able to pay bills or pay my rent. And, I've had to, I can remember going into my bank saying, hey, I want to, put my house up because I do believe this. I know it's going to get there. And luckily having a banker saying, we're not going to take your house, but let's figure out a line of credit. I had to go to, my very dear friend of mine and said, I need to borrow some money, big time. And, I was blessed and fortunate enough to where, they were able to say, hey, listen, I'm going to loan you this money, but let's put together a payment agreement because we need our money back. But, they went deep, and I just had some people very close to me to where, within a short period of time, I had to borrow, about $150,000, which to me, just as well been $1 million because I was tapped. Again, at this point, I'd sold off my properties, dumped my 401k, any pensions. I was all in.
Wow.
And I was about 130 grand short. And I was just blessed enough to where, I had 2 or 3 people come to me and said, and I something I'll never forget is my VP of operations coming to me saying, hey, listen, man, I know you're not taking a check and, you don't have to pay me this payday out, we'll catch up later. And I was like, dude, you can't do that. But the people around me believed. And these are core people. I had my CFO and my VP of ops basically come in and just say, hey, just don't pay us until we get caught up. And so, but while I appreciated it, to me, I felt like a failure, right? I failed my family. I failed the people depending on me. But we worked a lot harder. We got it done. We got everybody paid back. And, as a result, Workforce Solutions is debt free. We paid off the company and everybody associated, within 9 months. And so it worked out. But you couldn't have told me that the first 2 months. I thought we weren't going to make it.
Oh, man, I remember. Go for it, Steve. Go.
I was just curious, were you, more surprised or humbled when, some of these people believed so much in you that they were willing to take that leap? I mean, that's, again, when you have employees and you have people around you, like Pete and I mean, James has known us a long time, and, we get a lot of people that believe in us. And I think sometimes they believe in us more than we do. You always hear like, oh, you guys got a great company, you guys are exploding. And, sometimes you take that with a grain of salt, right? And sometimes you're like, yeah, we're trying, we're doing our best, we're doing this. But I mean, how did you take that? Because yours was pretty fast and furious, right? We kind of, ours was kind of a killing you with a spoon. You kind of jumped in with a dagger kind of on your side. So how did you process that? Because that's a tough thing to not only, sometimes you hear people talking about it and doing it, that's one thing, but when they actually forego their money, that's a leader to me. Like that shows you're a leader because they're following behind you and they trust in you and they have that ultimate faith, which sometimes makes the responsibility more, right? Now you're going, shit, now I just doubled down with these people. Now I really got to perform for them,
Steve, I think the thing that always surprises me, but it was consistent. My cousin Alton, my best friend Lene, and the people around me, they all said the same thing. They're like, "What are you waiting on? It's about time." And I was, when I was even discussing it, everybody around me was, even my old boss was like, I was waiting. I was wondering when you were going to go ahead and get started. And to me, it's, and I don't say this in any form of arrogance. I never saw it because, again, I never even wanted to be an entrepreneur. But everybody around me was saying it's about time. And now we're at a point where we're starting to see some success. Things are getting a little bit more comfortable. And of course, I'm still running as fast as ever, trying to figure out what's the next deal. How do we grow? How do we expand our business? But everybody around me are even saying, I told you so. They don't believe me when I say I'm surprised. They don't believe, I was just a hardworking guy. And so that's probably my biggest thing of everybody around me was like, it's about time.
So the competence, I think it speaks to the competence and what your friends and your circle have seen in you. That that sort of almost unconsciously competent, like to a degree where what you were able to accomplish in an hour probably would take some others 4, right? And then so, that's why the multiply effect, like, well, this guy can definitely run the business. I'll tell you real quick kind of where I landed and sort of maybe project that and get some feedback from you. I've had the same situation as you are when we hit about $2 million in revenue. I had a very comfortable business. Felt very good about myself and what we're able to build, delivering product to customers, innovating, everything was good. And then we hit that hole where we became too big for the processes, systems, and even some people. And since then, I haven't slept very, very well again. I've done that. I've done what you just did. That's a typical entrepreneur thought. Some people roll their eyes, but I don't care. I moved back my young child and my wife into my parents' house for like the 6 months to be able to rent it out my own house and to start this company. So all that first year, 2 years, boom, 3 years started to get easier. 4 years started getting nice. 5 year was probably the best year. And then year 6, get punched in the teeth again. Have you been punched in the teeth yet? Or do you see it coming?
You must see the blood in my gums right now. Well, we have, and it's a good story because we're learning so much from it. We very much like yourself, right? We get into year 5, things are great, things are booming, and as I mentioned at the top of our story, my previous employer was my first customer. Well, and I had a lot of relationships there, and I don't like to feel like I leveraged them, but they knew me, they know my work, they trusted me. I was considered a safe set of hands. Well, we get into just past year 5, year 6, and there's a new regime coming in. My number one customer, public company, 16 billion. They go through a major split. Now there's a new CEO, new CFO. There's a bunch of people running the show that don't have a clue who James Morris is, and more importantly, those that have heard the name, they're talking about who James Morris was, right? Oh, he used to be the GM, or who is this guy? And where we were able to go in and negotiate fair pricing based on the services, we had a group of young MBAs come in and put out a quote, and they were looking for the lowest price. And we had come in, and because I knew the business, we're offering all these boutique extra offerings, and we're offering you extra support, and we're going to be here 24 hours a day, and we're going to give out turkeys at Thanksgiving to every employee, and we're going to office in your facility, so we'll hire a dedicated resource. And you get somebody new that comes in and says, we don't want all that. We want you to drop 150 temps in our building and make sure they get paid, and we'll pay you, and we only want to pay this much. Well, we built our lifestyles around this model. Well, what that also told us is, how dare us have this one behemoth of a customer, and not, because the next regime that comes in may say, we'll just pull the plug. And so we ended up, we lost a couple $1 million a year worth of business because, there were business units that, actually wanted us to quote it below our own cost. So we had to now step back and says, well, we got to go sell this to other people because we know we're good at what we do. But then it's, what are we selling? What do we look like? We've had one big customer that was 98% of our business. And so we've had to step back, and now we're doing marketing. Now we're getting on social media. We're having to learn how to sell. We've never had to sell before. We just had to execute. And so we're in a different space right now. But as a company, we did take a significant step back. The way we've reacted to it, we've added 2 or 3 new customers. We do have another customer that seems like it's going to be just as large as my previous employer. But again, we go into it a little bit differently, right? We're never going to be reliant on one customer for our survival again. And so that's probably been our biggest challenge. And to be completely honest, that's a bit of a struggle for both my companies because they're both really have the same foundation customers. And we're at a point where, my other company, the primary customers are FedEx and UPS. They're 50-50 for the 49 of each one of those companies. So even when those guys pull out, it changes who we are. So we're learning to sell. We're diversifying our portfolio. So we're having to change. So it's a good problem to have, but I'm treating it like the wolf is at the door. I'm not going to wait until this thing goes out for quote again. I'm going to make sure that I'm out selling my business every day.
That is really good. All right, now we're getting somewhere, right? This is very, very interesting. So you did get punched in the mouth a little bit on the ribs. Yeah, you got ribs, a couple of broken ribs after this one. I think you're coming out okay, but I feel you. And this is like as soon as you get comfortable, and you want to do that. And some people say, and I know Steve, maybe your opinion on this one. Some people say, here's what they say. They say the success is measured in a way. The real business is when you can step out and the business operates on its own. Steve, how does that concept connect to what James and I were just discussing? Like, if he wasn't there, I think it's fair to say TMC would probably be very weak, if not dying right now.
Well, I think, what James said is, a lot of us deal with on different levels, right? It's a price point structure. It's a price versus value, right? At some point, the new regime came in and said, we don't see the value for the price that you're charging us. Your value's here, your price is here. We don't see that, so we're going to go put it out for bid because you're just a number. You're not a relationship anymore. And one could argue that maybe James and his team maybe got comfortable and dropped the ball and let that relationship slide a little bit, so that they couldn't keep that relationship. Or they could say the new regime just was not into relationships. They were only into bottom line dollar. I think what James has done a very good job of is he has good people in place. So I think in essence, James probably could step out to a varying degree. And that, the definition of a business is a profitable enterprise that runs without you. Right. So I think to a degree, James can step out of this and it is a business. What James needs to do, in my opinion, is he's the leader of the ship. He's the one that's stepping out on the bow, pointing way ahead, looking for these icebergs and looking for the problems. So one could also say that James maybe dropped the ball in leadership, maybe got back into the management level. He was managing or maybe comfortable and not looking out for the icebergs that were ahead. Because, and again, sometimes you don't know when you haven't traversed this route before, you don't know what's ahead. You don't know what's around the corner, right? None of us know what's, if we were to tell, we could not write a book on what's coming on year 10 of all of our businesses because we've never been to year 10. So we don't know what's happening. So I think that the lesson that I learned from this, from James and same as you, is that the leader always needs to be on the front of that ship looking for those icebergs because they're out there. And they may not appear. You may think, oh, a new regime, we're good to go, no problem, let's high five them. But in hindsight, like James said, now he's being a leader. He's out on the forefront and he's going, okay, you know what? I'm not going to put my team and my company in this position again. So what he's doing is what he should be doing, which is being the leader and looking out ahead. A leader doesn't do, a leader it inspires. And that's the difference. I think a lot of people, and Alex, you and I have talked about this before, that they misunderstand the word manager and leader. So a lot of people write these books on leadership and this and that, but you're really just saying to be a good manager. So a leader says, hey, I'm running over this hill. I want everyone to run behind me. And everyone's so inspired that they follow James. James, the manager, says, you, and you up that hill. Let's go. That's the manager. And so a lot of people think of that as leadership, directing your people where to go, which is not a leader. To me, the leader is removed from the company and they're constantly out there looking out for the wholesomeness of the company as a whole. Do you agree with that, James?
I do. I absolutely do. And I'm very, very guilty of, I see something that's not working the way that I want and I want to jump in. I had a manager, I come from a football background, as you know, Steve, and one of the things that I had a manager tell me one time, and he says, so you played quarterback, right? And I says, yeah, I played some quarterback. And he says, well, what if you were having a bad game and I called you to the sideline and says, take your helmet and shoulder pads off, give them to me, and I'm going to go win the game. And he goes out there and wins the game in my equipment. Well, what condition am I in next game? How do I ever go back out there? Because I'm looking over my shoulder. the team just wants him to play instead of me. And so, I've kind of gotten to where I'm accepting that I can't play quarterback anymore. I've got to really, I can't even be the OC or the head coach. I've got to be the owner. I've got to be the GM that's out in front, looking at the kids that are in college, looking at the talent, looking at the processes, looking at the technology, looking at the next, win, the next acquisition. So my role has changed. And again, that's not always a natural position for me to be in. And I'm so comfortable being a great quarterback, right?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable because it's unknown, right? Everybody likes to settle back into what you're comfortable with, which is what we all know and we're good with. Case in point, Alex and I were talking, and James, you and I talked about it last week when we met, about the EOS and the leadership and the book Traction. And I think that Alex is evolving into that also. So Alex has kind of engaged that book. At our company, we live on that. I mean, we just had our 2-day offsite last week for the year 2019, and the leadership went off site and we discussed the goals and the challenges. We went over the budget, the P&L, expenses, revenue. We went over everything for 2019, what our goals are as a company, and then break those down individually. Alex, what's your take so far on the EOS? Because I was explaining it to James for his company.
Yeah, so I think this is what is going to position my company to scale and succeed. And I am the first guy out there coaching everybody else on how to be a leader, and it's so comfortable to sort of slide down into the managerial role, because that's what we know, and that's my core competence. Like, I do sales, I do marketing, I do operations. I can do it all. I can map out processes for everything in this company. I know it best. I care about it most, and I know every single issue and a customer, and it's all in my head right here. and it hurts, man. It's just, and then you're absolutely right. The next thing happens. One of our partners says, "Well, we're gonna do the same thing you do, and here's your 2 weeks notice." And then everything just kind of like, what just happened, right? Okay, so now we have a competitor that we share most of our clients with, and what happens next? Like, we don't have the product they have, but they've obviously worked on the product we have for a year or more before they give me that 2 weeks notice. So I'm in a shit spot completely, but being an excellent manager while I'm at it. Excellent manager. People love me. We have good processes. And so this is what the EOS opened my eyes on, allowing your people. And then I take a step back, and this is the reveal. This is the reveal right now. We graded everybody's, according to the book, we went by the book, we graded everybody's performance with, A, B, or C. I can't remember exactly what the grades are, but A is the top, B middle, and C is like probably not good. Let's just call it that. And I got a B. I thought I was, I'm helping everybody. I'm in there. I know everything. I'm hanging over people and showing them how to do their job and bringing customers in. And I got a B. That was heart-wrenching. Why did I get
graded by your employees, by your fellow employees are the ones who grade you?
Correct.
Oh.
Correct. And I'm like, okay, well, I got a B because I didn't do my job. My job was to look out for the future opportunity of this organization and be the seer and not find out about this potential issue, along with all the other employees, and it's not having a plan to do it. Now, we scrambled and we built out the product and processes, and I think we're going to do just fine. But the point is, this taught me a big lesson, and EOS has that aspect to it where the visionary, as Steve says, and I'm learning a lot from Steve, because he's flying around, he's got all kinds of things. He seems like a guy who has a short attention span, but he's got his eye on the prize, and he is very, very, very driven, and he knows how to interview people, find the nuggets of wisdom, employ them, settle them in his mind, categorize them. He's got like a million checklists since he's brained, this guy. Steve is a checklist guy. That's how he operates. And so he just slots everything, all that knowledge. Anyway, but so I'm learning a lot from him. And so basically Steve put me on the EOS, essentially. That was my final trigger. I read the book 2 years ago, didn't give it justice, didn't give it attention, didn't give it the respect it deserved. And now we've implemented the system by the book. And I also realized that I should get my tentacles out of people's business. I have very competent people. They will make mistakes. It's okay. They will not learn if I constantly put my claw in their business. So I'm liberated and fascinated by the system. It's so simple and it's so functional. And I can't say, like right now, you would think like, yeah, I will implement this part, but not implement that part. So far, implemented every single step in a book by the book, and it works, period.
Yeah. And one of the things is when you think about it, James, as an example, he has 500 people spread across all over the US. We have people down in Mexico, right? And we have, 1,000 properties or so that we manage. So we have a lot of processes and procedures. I don't even have the knowledge and the ability to go and try to figure out all the different systems that we've created. But that's not my job, right? That's not my role. That's not James's role. I mean, we've taken our company and taken about 50 to 80%, 50 to 60% of it, and we've outsourced it to another country. And we're doing a better job than we were when our in-house employees were doing it. That to me is a perfect example of leveraging and getting the right people doing the jobs, but more important, the right managers managing those people. Because I don't talk to the teams in Mexico except when I train them or we have a meeting or this or that. But I'm not, that's an extension. So I just think of James. He's got that 500x, right? He's 500 times. You've got 27 people. I think I have 30 or 40 or something total. He has 10 times me. So think of that on that level of what he's doing. Basically the same age as us, Alex. His company's the same size, same age as ours is. So you got to ask yourself, okay, how does he think differently? What lessons did he learn? And how does he think differently than we did to say, 27, I get 27 placed before breakfast, basically, right? I mean, so James, I would say James does something, he thinks a little bit differently than we do. And there's other people that could squash James, that tell James, man, what are you doing? 500 people, you should have 5,000 people. I know a guy in the Philippines, I think he said at one time he had 70,000 virtual assistants outsourced out. I don't know if that's true or not. But even if he was a 10th right, even if he had 7,000 placed, just think about that, the logistics, that is all done by leadership. It's not done by working hard. And I think the thing that we all need to learn, I don't think it's a one and done, is that we can't confuse being busy with being productive. There's no correlation to you and I saying, hey, James, I just worked 24.01 hours today. I was much more productive than you. And you go, yeah, Steve, I just bought a company worth 500 million. And that took me about 2 minutes to sign the contract. And I'm going to go, man, but I worked harder. I worked longer than you, James. That's not fair. And so I think that's the difference of being the leader to being the manager. And I think I think that we're, as smaller entrepreneurs, we're all neck and neck until someone takes that huge leap ahead. And you go, man, how did they do that? Like, I don't have enough hours in the day. But we all correlate being successful with hard work, because all of our parents, I think all three of us, they related hard work to being successful, right? I mean, that's the generation that we all came from. And I think that's what we related to. Do you guys agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I see that 100%. I tell you, this has been a great interview. We always start with a little bit exploring someone's business, and by the end of each show, I feel like I've earned a friend, or I'd love to sit down for a beer, coffee, what have you, and talk shop. So I would say it's probably time for us to wrap this up. Any parting words of wisdom from you, James?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity. Again, I certainly feel like I gained a friend, and, I love interacting with Steve, my brother there. I appreciate him, and I'm certainly proud of you. you know, I really think that as an entrepreneur, you know, if there's any words of advice that I would give, is just, you know, I see a lot of entrepreneurs that started around the time that I did. And, you know, I have an opinion, and this may be a little off topic, but, you know, I see a lot of people using their businesses as ATM machines and not reinvesting in the business, using it as a way to, you know, pull quick cash out. And I've got friends that, you know, I've got a guy right now literally that just bought a 6,000 square foot house. Don't ask me why, you know, for, you know, and again, his preference, his choice. But I also know that, you know, he has heavy concentration risk in his business. And it, you know, it just kind of makes me look and smile and say, I've got to make smart decisions, you know, regardless of what everybody does, you know, reinvest in my business, you know, treat my business like a business, you know, not an ATM machine. And you got to continue to grow it. You got to continue to change, and you got to continue to add customers, because again, anything can happen and you lose a customer, and then where does that leave you? And so, I mean, that's probably, you know, I guess it comes down to treating the business like a business.
I think that's the best advice I've heard given on this podcast so far. This is so
I would agree.
So foundational. Like everything else, like leadership abilities, skills, all that is what we discussed is all kind of important, right? And you have to gain them as you go. But treating your business as a business, our industry really, really needs help with that. Really needs help with that. Play the long game. Treat business as a business. Give it the respect and the investment of time and energy and resources it needs, and see it grow. I really appreciate, James, your time and your wisdom. Would love to have you come back again and talk to us as well. Steve, thank you for your time, and have a good time in Sydney. And boys and girls, thank you for listening. We'll see you on next week.
See you guys. Thanks, James.
Thanks.